everybody, to another episode of SaaS Stories. Today, I am very happy to be joined by Kate Shanahan, co-founder of Brieff. Welcome, Kate. So excited to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Joe. Really excited to be here.
And Kate, you're a local Aussie of late. However, you're traveling at the moment. You're doing a little bit of expansion work for Brieff. Tell us a little bit about what Brieff is and, how are you expanding? What are your plans there?
Yeah, sure. So, Brieff is a B2B SaaS advisory platform really for accounting firms who are looking to grow their advisory services and really help their small businesses clients reach their goals.
Amazing. And how long has Brief existed? Did you start it in Australia or in the US? And why did you think UK is the next logical next step?
Yeah, so for a couple of reasons. We came up with the idea for Brieff about 2.5 years ago. So my co-founder and I actually met doing our MBAs at Oxford. So we met over in the UK, but we started Brieff in Australia, and we spent about a year building the product. And it's been in the market for about a year and a half. And the reason why we really are coming over to the UK now to really look at the UK market along with the Australian market is to really make sure as we continue to build Brieff that we build it with the UK kind of accountants in mind as well. Our philosophy when building the product is really building alongside our users. I think a lot of founders, say this, and at sometimes it can be lip service, but for us, it really is kind of the core of what we do and why we do what we do. We really care about this problem immensely. And even from when we just had a very small idea, um, we worked with 16 accounting firms just learning their processes, their workflows, their biggest pain points, and built the MVP really alongside them and kind of co-designed it, if you'll say, but really build it alongside them. And then we've just taken that as we continue on. And so for us, it was really important to be here as we expand to really do the same thing alongside some UK firms as well.
I have so many questions. Starting with, now that you're in the UK, you're on the ground, are you seeing any differences that you need to, adjust, like with your marketing and sales strategies? Is it a whole different content that you need to create? How are the audiences different? What are you finding?
Oh my gosh, totally. I mean, I think on the surface, it really just goes to show, and I think this was probably true for so many different sectors as well, is on the surface, they look the same. And when we were in Australia, we thought, oh, these groups are so similar. This will be kind of a walk in the park, and we'll do exactly what we did in Australia, but it's really not the case. And there's so many little nuances that make a huge difference. And so yeah, the content, the messaging that we put out there is um, I wouldn't say it's very different, but it's made us think about what we're doing in a very different way. Um, the overall feeling towards advisory is also very different here than it is in Australia. So, just to kind of give some context, in terms of the accounting industry, Australia and New Zealand are actually really those market leaders around the world, which is very exciting. And that was a really great benefit of starting Brieff in Australia, especially with the rise of zero and cloud accounting. Cloud adoption is so high within the Australian New Zealand accounting space, whereas in the UK, it's not as high. And so while it may seem that these true groups are very similar, the way they operate can be very different. And so there are a lot of nuances, which is why I think being a founder, if you're expanding into a new region, it's really important to be on the ground and learn firsthand. And there's really nothing like founder-led sales, which I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I really want to take a deep dive actually into what you just said, founder-led sales, and really just, expanding into the other markets. First of all, I just want to say I'm quite surprised to hear that normally Australia and New Zealand are like 5 years behind the UK and the US, but that's amazing, I think, to hear.
Yep.
I want to start at the beginning though. So you originally worked at Goldman Sachs. Um, I want to find out maybe how that influenced your journey into co-founding Brief.
Yeah, totally. So right after university, I worked at Goldman Sachs first in Salt Lake City in Utah, and then moved to the New York kind of headquarters. And it completely shaped, why I decided to do Brief, how we operate, everything about it. I think working at a bank like that is an incredible experience as a young person. It taught me so many skills. It taught me how to be a professional. It taught me what pressure would feel like, um, and really was an incredible training ground. But I knew really early on that working in a huge corporate like that was really not something that I wanted to do long term. And that really kind of set the path of wanting to go to business school, and then eventually start my own business. Um, it is such an incredible place, but it is for a very specific type of person, which I think a lot of people can attest to. I don't think I'm the only one that feels that way, but I think when you are working at a place that has such high expectations, you learn how to become a high performer really quickly. And that has like really set me kind of on my path and is, I'm so thankful that I had that experience.
Yeah, it sounds like you had some amazing learning experiences, maybe some mentors in that space. So you did that in New York. What then brought you to Australia?
Yeah, so I'm actually a dual citizen between Australia and the US. So my dad's side of the family, they're all from Melbourne. And I actually had done a year of high school in Australia. So I did timber top at Geelong Grammar, which is like notorious for kind of this outdoor learning program, which was super cool. So I had spent a lot of time kind of going back and forth, and I was never actually planning on living or settling down in Australia. It just wasn't on my radar until COVID hit. And so my co-founder and I, Matt, actually met doing our MBAs at Oxford, but halfway through our MBA, COVID hit. And us and a bunch of our friends, but we really decided that we wanted to have that in-person experience. There's really, I mean, Oxford is so magical that having that in person is so there's nothing quite like it. And so we decided halfway through the MBA to defer for 12 months. And Australia was really the only country open. So he's from Brisbane. Um, we were able to take like a repatriation flight back to Australia. I got an internship at a private equity firm in Sydney, and we kind of waited it out for 12 months until we could go back to our MBA and just really fell in love with Sydney. That's when we kind of came up with a business idea, started kind of mulling over. It was a completely different idea, but that's when the sparks of wanting to start a business formed. And then we went back to our MBA 12 months later.
Right. I love that you said it was a completely different idea, but the way you said it, it sounded like, because a lot of people, when they have an idea, they're very tied to that idea, even if it's going horribly wrong, if they can see it's not working, they're still, no, we have to keep trying. So I love that you found a pivot and that, you now have something amazing. But what were those early aha moments? Like what gaps did you see in the market? And also, what challenge did you see your target audience, like accountants, facing that made you want to create this product?
Yeah, so I mean, it's so interesting kind of how everything happens. I think when you look back, it becomes like a really perfect story and it all makes sense. But at the time, it didn't, as the start, like the dots don't always connect. But right, kind of the second half of our MBA, my mom actually in Montana bought a strip club and turned it into a restaurant. So the strip club during COVID went bankrupt. She bought the building, did this whole kind of refurbishment, turned it into a restaurant. Right after the MBA, I went down to help her kind of set that up and then start operating it, and realized really quickly and she had never started a restaurant before, but was like super passionate, and really realized really quickly, like, business owners start something based off of passion, don't always have that business acumen. how could you? You can't kind of expect someone to, especially if you have a trade, to be great at that as well as like how, running a business, right? And so she relied really heavily on her accountant for that strategic advice. And I just really saw that relationship, saw how powerful it was, and instrumental it really was into her kind of business success with the restaurant. And at the same time, my co-founder, Matt, his brother, who is an electrician, was starting his own electrician business back in Brisbane. And so Matt was really helping him kind of also learn the ropes of how to start a business and really gain that business acumen. And it just allowed us, together, we were like doing these very similar things in a very different way and in different places around the world, and just thought, you know, it's really, really important for business owners to be able to get the support they need in order to grow that business. These accountants are doing it time and time again. How can we enable them to be able to deliver more of that advice, and help kind of their businesses succeed? They're the perfect person to do it. They understand the numbers and they're able to kind of give that strategic kind of advice and guidance. And that was really the idea for Brieff. And then we kind of went from there.
Yeah. Amazing story. You've certainly jumped around and then landed on this amazing idea. So coming back to accountants, having probably spoken to quite a few of them now, what were the biggest challenges that you see in that line of work for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge, right, is that you have tax and compliance, and this is the same whether you're in Australia or the UK. This part of it is really the same as the only way for these firms to compete is through price. And so, theoretically, tax and compliance should be the same no matter who you go to, right? Because black and white, these are rules. And so the only way for these firms to compete against each other is really through price. And then it just means that those services get cheaper and cheaper. And we'll see kind of in the next couple of years as AI really comes into this field and line of work, that it's just going to make it cheaper and cheaper for these services to be done, which means that you can only compete by having insane volume. And so you're seeing these firms kind of shift and want to really kind of have these client-centric services, these value-adding services, to really create that niche for their business, to really showcase, hey, this is what we're doing that sets us apart, that is so different from everyone else. It's our unique value proposition. It's the thing that no other kind of firm can replicate, because everyone is doing advisory in their own way. And so it's really them kind of taking that and growing those service offerings, just because they're so much more profitable. They're, more rewarding. It attracts younger staff who want to go into the accounting industry. And so I think in the next couple of years, you're really going to see this kind of line of work within the accounting space really take off and flourish, and really be instrumental for all small business owners.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think it's really tough when you're kind of measured on price and price only. I think there's definitely a human element that could help you stand out. Um, so, like you said, a lot of these guys, they're so good with numbers, but maybe not necessarily knowing how to tackle client relationships. So, what tools or strategies do you recommend that they can pursue in that instance?
Yeah. So in terms of accountants, are you asking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think practice. I think it is really something, and with Brieff, we really want to enable more accounts to be able to deliver more of this type of advice. The biggest pain points that we really see is that oftentimes this type of service is incredibly ad hoc and unstructured. So they're doing different things for different clients. It's all over the place. It's kept with the senior partner, it's in their head, it's not written down. And so it's really hard for the firm to replicate. And it's also incredibly difficult to train younger staff to be able to do this. And that's why you'll hear kind of these partners who have 30 years of experience say, it took me 30 years to learn how to do this. It's all that experience that is needed. And with Brieff, we're really helping these firms structure and deliver that service offering in such a structured way that can be repeatable throughout the firm and add a lot of transparency and collaboration so that younger, more junior staff members can be able to see kind of how that process is done and be able to help with different aspects, whether that's help prep for meetings or send out those meeting summaries, but learn by doing this, not just by shadowing, and also make it so it's much more efficient so that they can service even more clients and it doesn't take as much time to be able to have that kind of session. And so I really say it's practice. It's having those conversations. I think the biggest misconceptions is that clients don't want to talk to their accountant. Every small business owner that we chat to always say, accountants are the first person I go to when I have a question. They are the one, they're kind of the line of defense, and the accountants then kind of maybe will take them to someone else who might be able to answer that question in a more holistic way, but they're really always the first person that they go to. And be able, I think, lastly, I think a big misconception about advisory is that it's about the answers and advice that you give, but it's really mostly about the questions that you ask. Most business owners know what they should be doing or know the answers, but they need someone to help them take them from working in the business to working on the business. And it's really those simple questions that help them kind of uncover the answers themselves, along with also learning how to kind of have that financial literacy, which accounts are perfect for doing. So oftentimes it's really mentoring their business owner clients on how to read a P&L. What does a balance sheet mean? How do you really look at cash flow? And those are simple things that accountants think are so simple that most business owners don't know how to do, right? Depending on kind of what their trade is or what kind of their kind of niches within that business. And so those are invaluable skill sets that accounts can really help give.
Absolutely. I was laughing as you were saying that because I just thought of all the silly questions I've asked my accountant. And I'm like, yeah, I have no idea, but he must think that I just I'm asking lots of silly questions. But no, absolutely. I mean, I think it also kind of puts them in that thought leadership space and that education space because, if they're educating their clients or their potential clients, then there's like a trust element there. From a marketing standpoint, we see this working time and time again. If you're out educating your competition, then the clients will come to you because they trust you, they can depend on you, and they know they can ask you those silly questions. They don't feel scared to do so, right?
100%, 100%.
Now, coming back to that sales and marketing question, I wanted to do a deep dive into. Let's start with the early days of Brieff. What were some quick marketing or some really clever marketing campaigns that really helped you scale Brieff in the early days?
I mean, I think there is nothing more powerful for us than word of mouth. And I think that, I think as founders, we're all going under this, like get into this trap where, depending if you're on the VC train or, you're not, you're bootstrapped or kind of semi-bootstrapped, you feel like you have to spend a ton of money, in order to build that awareness. And I think that, personally, I think constraints are the most important thing for a founder. I think especially in the early days, you want to have really limited resources, really limited cash for a number of different reasons, but especially in the sales and marketing arm, you want to be able to get creative, do things differently than what's been done before. Don't just follow the same playbook. And the only way to follow those same playbooks or those bigger companies is by having a ton of cash. And so if you don't have that, it forces you to think outside the box. For us, it was about word of mouth really quickly. And that's really how we continue to grow. And it's really only through word of mouth, which makes that our lead generation really, really kind of high converting and the trust is already there. And so we really, I think in terms of the early days, when we first kind of built our MVP and had kind of our first believers on that product, we told them all that we were raising kind of an angel round, and many of those kind of first users actually wanted to be our investors. And in terms of sale and marketing, that was huge for us, because they felt like they were even more part of the journey, and then they now have skin in the game to kind of help us kind of spread the word. And so that is probably like the biggest thing that was huge for us. So I would really recommend any founder who, has kind of first early adopters, um, let them in your round, especially your pre-seed round. And it doesn't matter the check size. It just doesn't.
That's really interesting, actually. I never thought of using your clients as investors, but it makes so much sense because they're invested in the platform. If they're early adopters as well, they're, advocates for technology. They'll be coming back to you, making really good recommendations on how you can change it, improve it, make it better, and then spread the word themselves. Um, from an operations point of view, I always love to ask this: what was your first hire and why?
So in terms of us, we actually have it's still my co-founder and I, we had a CTO for a little bit. But really for us, it's about keeping the team small until we can widely scale. And I think that, you know, I guess in, my kind of hot take on that is I think that startups um they hire too quickly. And I think that you have to work out and kind of be ripping at the seams and making sure that you're doing things in really different ways. So we've had contractors before through marketing help with the product and kind of development of the product, but it's really kind of built by my co-founder. I'm the one doing most of the sales and operations in that kind of regard, customer service. And I think until you cannot, like your calendar can't take it, your schedule can't take it, that's when it's time to hire. We've been able to be so nimble and change so quickly, and we wouldn't be able to do that without a team. And I think that, something else, which you didn't really ask, but I think it's also kind of an important note is that I oftentimes, especially with startups, people judge how big the company is based on the team size. And I think that is a mistake. And I think that as founders, I think a lot of us can sometimes feel self-conscious that your team is smaller, but you have no idea what some of these companies kind of revenue is. And that's kind of a more taboo question to probably ask. And so I would just recommend other founders not feel self-conscious about having smaller teams, and for as long as you can. It has nothing to do with how much revenue you're generating. And I think that there's kind of a movement now, or more kind of accepted, to kind of go down this bootstrap route versus just kind of VC funding and then hire 25 people.
I absolutely second that. I think it is a mistake a lot of companies make. They kind of measure their success by the size of their teams. But really, I've met so many incredible founders that have a very small team, maybe even just a team less than 5, and they're generating amazing revenue. But not just that, they're living a lifestyle business that gives them that work-life balance, which is why they started the business. And you're right, it shouldn't just be about revenue. I think I've had the pleasure of interviewing a few founders on this podcast, and a lot of them, the way they talk, it's always about solving a problem that they really wanted to solve, and they're very passionate about it. And I think, if you have some incredible client stories that can attest to that, then that's an amazing goal to have reached.
Oh, 100%. And I think also, um, in terms of kind of taking that VC funding or not taking that VC funding, we both have like VCs as well as angel investors on our cap table. But I think it's really interesting because I think sometimes there's the misconception of, okay, you have that funding and now you have to like explode. And I think, really trying to stay as constrained as you can for as early as you can until you kind of get, exactly what lever to pull that will kind of make every dollar you put in equal $2 coming out, or whatever kind of analogy that you want to use, and then really grow at this massive rate. I think oftentimes startups grow way too early.
Mm.
And I think, there's a lot of reasons for that. And it's so hard. Like it's so hard to try and stay disciplined in that way. And, you oftentimes second guess yourself and think maybe you're making a mistake, but and maybe I am, but it's really about, kind of having that philosophy and just kind of sticking with it and, you know, hopefully it works.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do this. I think everyone has their journey, their story, and this is what I'm trying to find out on this podcast is just how did you do it? What was your
Yeah.
experience? And just hoping to provide some inspiration to all the people listening. Just coming back to the people question as well, I think it's a lot easier now for startups to not hire because we have AI at our disposal. So, how have you found AI? How have you used it? Do you have plans to, implement it into your product as well?
Yep. So we actually AI is implemented in our product already. We use AI every day. So in terms of our product, we've implemented AI. So it's it's a big proposition, kind of value proposition of our product. How we kind of operate is we take qualitative as well as quantitative data from small business owners, use AI to really help prep um, advisors for those meetings, kind of see those throughputs, generate meeting summaries that they can send out to their clients, as well as kind of actions and make that more efficient in that way. So there's an AI note taker. There's all kind of those elements that I think make AI really great in terms of how we're building the product. I mean, we use AI every day to kind of help build code, help check our product. I use it every day in terms of sales and marketing. I think it's incredibly powerful. Um, I think it just allows you to do more than you've ever done before, but something that AI does not kind of replace is judgment and taste. And so it's really up to the person to be able to use it to your best advantage. I think, everyone can smell inauthenticity a mile away, right? They know exactly when something's been AI generated. And so, really kind of learning how to use that to kind of just enhance every kind of strength that you have versus just using it to kind of replace you.
Yeah, yeah. I have to agree with that. There's really specific words that I see in like blogs and social media posts and emails where I'm like, that was AI generated. I just know it.
Yeah.
um, Personal pet peeve of mine is the word unlock. I think ChatGPT's favorite word. But what is like one task that you absolutely use AI the most for? Really just to help you in your day-to-day operations and, growing the business.
Yeah, so in terms of definitely the product, it would be to write code and also
Mhm.
check. For me, I use it all of the time to so I personally don't really like to use AI for writing content. Um, that's just my own personal thing. I want it to come from my own voice, and I also want to become a stronger communicator. And I feel like I can only do that if I do it myself. But I use it as a way to help me generate ideas for kind of content for LinkedIn posts, outlines. It's really helpful for. Um, and so that's kind of how I use it is really as a way to brainstorm.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I definitely went through a period where I was using it quite a bit to the point where I'm like, I think I have forgotten how to write. So I had to go back and stop using it and just kind of retrain myself. So you're right. It just becomes a lost skill if you keep using it.
Yeah, it's just, and
Mm.
it just, I think, there's only so much time in the day, right? So you have to kind of put your best foot forward. But it's just something that I really want to work on. I think I'm okay, but I want to get better. And it's kind of my 2025 goal is to become even a stronger communicator, um, in every way I possibly can. So I just don't want to shortcut it by having kind of AI write all my
Yeah.
content.
Um, What is one bit of advice that you would give to other founders or people wanting to be founders? Maybe they have an idea in the space right now, they're working at a company, they see a gap, maybe they've gone to their boss and said, why don't we do this, or why don't we do it this way? But their ideas aren't being heard, so they're wanting to start their own business. What's the biggest advice you'd say to them?
I mean, other than do it, I I listen to a lot of podcasts with founders kind of talking. I love it so much. I love this type of content. I consume all of it. Um, and something that I can sometimes get frustrated by is it's so easy to forget how hard it is and just to talk about the success, um, or just to talk about like kind of finally getting to the top of the mountain. And when you are in the thick of it as a founder, you think, wow, it must not have been as hard for other people. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. Um, and so I think my biggest advice, and I tell myself this every day, is that every day is going to be uncomfortable because you are doing something you've never done before. And everyone else is doing that as well, and to just keep going. And so when you hear people talk about their startup journeys and maybe they're not highlighting, you know, the intense struggle that often comes because there are such lows and such highs, but it's so much easier to focus on the highs and it's so much better, I think, mentally. It's just to remember that, everyone else was there once as well, and the pendulum will shift. And you just have to give it time and you have to kind of go through it, but you are not kind of the only one that is going through hard things, and you can do it.
I love that. It's so true, isn't it? It's kind of like the social media illusion where you just think everyone's living their best lives. There's no struggles, they're always on holidays. Um, I mean, this is what I love about this podcast. One question I always ask everyone on the show is like, what were your biggest challenges? How did you overcome them? Like, tell me your story. And people have definitely shared that yes, there are struggles, and yes, it does take a lot of hard work and persistence. Certainly takes a certain type of person and personality to keep pushing through, because I know, me included, there's so many days you just want to give up, but then there's always something that keeps driving you. So yeah, absolutely.
100%.
Last question for you. I love asking this one. It's, if you had a time machine and you could go back in time to talk to your younger self, maybe at the very beginning of the Brieff journey, what bit of advice would you give yourself, and what might you change that you had done?
I think, it's so funny. Like when I started Brief, I was so naive. Um, to kind of this journey. Like I just had it in myself. Like I just had this feeling like I can do this. This is going to be a walk in the park. Just kind of go for it. And, obviously it's a roller coaster. And so I'm really happy that I had that naiveness. Or else I don't think I would have started if I really knew how hard it could potentially be. And so I think I would really kind of give myself like the advice of just like trying to keep that as long as possible, to kind of have this like insane optimism for as long as I possibly can. And I think I still have that. But I think, just kind of reminding, as you have like bumps in the road, that it is like a windy, windy road, and the next success is just around the corner. And so you kind of have to always kind of go through kind of hard dips to have these crazy highs. So I would say that's probably like my biggest advice to my younger self, I
Love
guess, in
that.
that way.
Love that.
Um, in terms of things that I would do differently, I mean, you know what, the thing I would do so differently if I could kind of go back, and I think this is why, as I think about it all the time, like second time founders are in such a powerful position, regardless of whether their first startup like succeeded or failed by any metric, um, is you don't sweat the small stuff. And I would just kind of wish I could go back, and the things at the time that I thought were so big and so hard and, so whatever, that I really kind of mulled over and stressed over, they really didn't end up being that big of a deal. They didn't kind of matter as much as I thought they would. And so I would kind of go and just say kind of not stress about some of those things as I did in the beginning. What is the colors and am I using the right word and all of that kind of stuff that I think we all do when we're doing
Yeah.
this for the first time.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think I'm still sweating the small stuff, but it's definitely an advice that I have to keep repeating in my mind. I love what you said about the advice as well. Yeah, the insane optimism. I think as you get more and more successful, you just develop imposter syndrome and you start second guessing yourself. So yeah, keep reminding yourself about that Kate that decided, yeah, I can do this. It's super easy. Let's go.
100%. 100%. You have to keep that as long as you can. And, hopefully I still have it, but it's something that I, always want to have because it's so easy to lose.
Definitely hold on to it for as long as possible. Kate, thank you so much for being on the show. I really enjoyed our chat. I love your story. I think there's definitely some inspiration there. I know the listeners would love. So thank you so much. Such a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me.